there, crafters! Today we're bringing the beauty of cherry blossoms indoors with 4 fun and creative DIY projects. Whether you're a fan of floral decor or just looking to add a touch of spring to your space, these projects are sure to brighten your day. Hi, my name is Katie from Lady Red Crafting. Let's grab our supplies and get started. So who doesn't love a great decor piece? We're going to start out this project with a Dollar Tree frame, and this is an 8x10 frame. We're only going to use the frame on the outside and the backing, so you can save the glass and the insert for another craft. Next, I'm going to grab some craft sticks. And these are bigger than popsicle sticks, but smaller than tongue depressors. They're that medium-sized craft stick that you can find at the Dollar Tree, but any size will work just fine. And I'm using my clippers from the Dollar Tree, and these were just in the garden section, and they work really well in cutting these craft sticks. So we're going to just snip the ends off of these craft sticks, and we're going to do some variety of sizes and just lay them out on our backing. And some of them I'll do like 3 pieces and others I'll do 4, but I'm just gonna vary it up so it doesn't look the same. Just wanted to note that all of these creations today were inspired by Lisa at Crafting My Best Life with Lisa. So I'm going to link her in my description box below. Please check her out and give her some love. Thanks! So now that we have all of our craft sticks laid out, I had a little bit of an overhang on either end of the backing. So what I did before I glued anything down was I took a pencil and I just marked a line on either side, just so when we started gluing things down, I knew where the edges were that I wanted to keep everything centered. Now we're just going to remove those craft sticks from our backing and keep them in the order we want to glue them down in. And if you have any rough edges, you can just take a little piece of sanding paper or a sanding block. I'm using my zip sander and I'm just going to sand those down. This next step, I'm using some Elmer's glue, but some tacky glue would work just fine. And I just poured a little bit in a bowl so it'll be easier for me to spread with the paintbrush. And using a paintbrush, I'm just going to paint about a 1.5 to 2 inch piece so that I can do little rows at a time and not overwhelm myself trying to do the whole thing really quickly. And then I start laying out my craft sticks, and I make sure to use that pencil mark that I made earlier to line up my first row. And we're just going to keep repeating the steps until we fill the whole entire piece of the backing. And now that we have all of our craft sticks in place, I'm going to take our backing and flip it over and put a book on top of it and let it sit for about an hour to dry. Now that our piece is dry, let's go ahead and move it to a paintable surface. And I'm going to use my Waverly chalk paint in the color Truffle, and we're going to coat all of our craft sticks. And for this project, 1 coat of the Truffle paint will be plenty. And once that's completely dry, I grab my plaster colored paint from Waverly Chalk, and we're going to dry brush a heavy coat over the top of these craft sticks. And once this is dry, I grab my Waverly Chalk paint in the color White, and I'm just going to do a very light dry brush with that color over the top just to give it a little bit more dimension. Now once everything is dry, I go ahead and put this in the vertical position, and I double check to make sure that I have this the right side up. And now I'm going to grab my Waverly Chalk paint in the color Truffle and a detailing brush. And now we're just going to paint a very simple tree. We're just going to do the branches and the trunk. Now once your tree is completely dry, I'm grabbing some Waverly chalk paint in the color Plaster, and I'm just going to put it on a little piece of scrap cardboard here. Next, I'm going to take some of my Waverly chalk paint in the color Red, And we're going to add that to the plaster, and we're going to come up with a very pretty pink. And once you're satisfied with the color, I'm going to grab a sponge. And funny story here, I could not find a sponge in my craft room. So I went and asked my husband if he had a sponge, and he had one for his soldering set. So he let me borrow it for this craft. And since I was using this for painting, I ended up ordering him another sponge for his soldering set. And we'll keep this one in the craft room for future crafts. So we're just going to lightly sponge all over the branches. And then I did do a few along the bottom just so that it looked like the flowers were falling from the tree. And once this is completely dry, I grab my Waverly chalk paint in the color Ballet, and we're just going to do the exact same thing going over the dark pink. I'm going to grab my heat tool and dry everything again. And once it's completely dry, I'll grab my Waverly chalk paint in the color Plaster, and we're going to repeat the same steps, but just very lightly going over with that plaster, just to give it a little bit more dimension. And now that everything is dry, I go ahead and grab my frame. And at first I was going to keep the frame white, but I decided that I really wanted something a little bit darker. So we're going to paint this with the color Truffle from Waverly chalk paint. And I was going to do 2 coats of paint, but I decided I liked the look of it after 1 coat of paint with a little bit of streaks in it. So we're just going to do it that way. And once everything was completely dry, I took the frame outside and I sprayed it down with some of this Rust-Oleum clear matte enamel. And this stuff works great. Now while that's drying, let's go back to our painting. I grabbed my Mod Podge in matte because I don't want a shiny finish. And we're going to just seal the whole entire painting using that Mod Podge. And now that both pieces are completely dry, I'm going to put them together. We'll add that frame right back to our painting. And wow, this piece turns out stunning. This is definitely a beginner-friendly craft, but looks amazing and looks like this was professionally done. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. To start this project out, we're going to use a wood wreath from the Dollar Tree and a roll of wired jute cord. What we're going to do here is I'm taking this wired jute cord and I'm just going to wrap it around my wreath, and I'm going to use a little bit of hot glue to attach it as well. And we're going to make the outline of a tree of life. What I'm doing here is I'm just using the wired jute to do the frame of this tree. And after the first branch, I'm going to cut this with some wire cutters, and I recommend doing that because this wire is a little bit tough to cut through and it might hurt your or damage your scissors, so using the wire cutters just makes it a little bit easier. Once we get that first branch or stem done for our tree, I'm going to go ahead and I pick a spot on the tree, and that's where I'm going to make all of the other branches come out from. So I'm going to just tie that jute to that spot, and then we'll just wrap the other piece around the wreath and do the exact same thing with the hot glue to tighten it up and make sure that it stays in place. So while we have a moment, I want to tell you all about this month's playlist. I'm excited to be hosting Recreation Inspiration this month with Lowly D Creations. This playlist is all about recreating something that inspires you. My projects today were inspired by crafting my best life with Lisa. Lisa's passion for crafting is contagious, and her talent for transforming simple materials into stunning creations is truly inspiring. Please check out the playlist and the inspiration links in my description box below to see all of these amazing creations. Thanks! So now that we have our frame of our tree all done, I'm going to grab some regular jute cord, and this one is from Walmart. It's a little bit thicker jute cord, and we're going to just go ahead and we're going to wrap around the trunk to start. And this is going to take a little bit. It does take quite a bit of jute. So I tied it at the bottom, and I'm just going to wrap that up and around until I get the size of a trunk that I would like. And once I have our trunk, we're going to take some more of that jute, and I'm just going to wrap it around each one of these branches, kind of doing the same thing as I did earlier. So I'll tie a knot at the end closest to the trunk and stuff that knot inside of the trunk and hot glue it into place so nobody can see it. And then I'm just going to wrap that twine all the way around each one of the branches until I'm satisfied with how it looks. And while wrapping twine can be easy to do, it did take me about 45 minutes to wrap this tree. And if you're enjoying this content, please consider hitting that subscribe button below. Thanks! Now let's transform this into a cherry blossom tree. I have some leftover wine corks, and I'm just going to slice them here on my little green mat. And I'm going to slice them as thin as I can with my razor blade. And for this craft, I ended up using 4 wine corks. Going back to our tree, I flipped this over a few times to figure out which side I want to be the front of this tree in this piece. And once I have that decided, we're going to go back and grab those wine corks we cut. And using some hot glue, I'm just going to place these wine corks sporadically throughout the tree, and then I'm going to place a little bit on the bottom just to look like the flowers have fallen off of the tree. And now that we have all of our wine corks placed on the tree, I'm going to grab my Folk Art Matte Vintage Tea Rose Pink. And we're going to use this, and I'm just going to put a little bit of it in a bowl. Starting out with the pink paint, and I'm using a sponge brush. And we're just going to use that brush and tap that pink paint all over those wine corks. Once we're satisfied with the pink paint, we let that dry for a few moments, and I'm going to grab out my Waverly chalk paint and plaster. Next, we're going to take a round brush and just tap a little bit of that plaster paint on each one of those wine corks. And this will just give it a little bit more of a realistic look. And once the paint has dried, I flip this over and I'm going to add a ribbon to the back to make a little hook. And to attach it, I'm just using hot glue and my staple gun. And here is what it looks like. Wow, this is so cute. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Let's make a decorative vase with a twist. I'm starting out with this little vase that I got at Walmart and some old greeneries that I had from Christmas time. The key with the greeneries is just pick one that you can use that can lay flat on your vase. So what I'm having to do here is I'm going to be trimming some of the smaller pieces off of this greenery so it will lay flat because I really wanted something that looked like branches on my vase. Now, once we have all of our branches cut, I go ahead and grab my vase and my greeneries. I actually grabbed an egg carton as well, and I'm going to place the vase in the egg carton just to make it a little bit easier to hold. And I started out by trying to add this greenery with E6000, and yeah, that was a mess. That did not work out. So we switched over to hot glue. And all we're trying to do here is just attach all of these greeneries onto the bottom part of our vase. And since I want these to look like cherry blossoms, I'm making mine kind of look like trees. And when all of these little branches are attached, this is what it looks like. So next we're going to go ahead and use our Waverly chalk paint in the color plaster and paint this vase all around the outside. And I did 2 coats of paint on this vase. And here is what it looks like. I put this down on a paintable surface and I grab my truffle paint from Waverly. And we're going to do a nice little coat of paint over the top of the branches. Next, we're going to grab our Waverly chalk paint in the color plaster and just do a quick dry brush over the top of the branches to give it a little more dimension. I'm going to grab that egg carton again and place the vase down on that. And I also grabbed a few Q-tips, and I'm going to rubber band 5 Q-tips together. So I grabbed a piece of cardboard and I'm going to put some of my paint on it. We're going to start out with the Vintage Tea Rose paint from Folk Art. Next, I add some Waverly chalk paint in the color Ballet. And now I'm going to add some of my red Waverly chalk paint as well. I'm not going to use the red as it is. I'm going to mix in some of my plaster paint with that. And I really like the color pink I get mixing the plaster paint with this red. And now I'm going to take my little bundles of Q-tips and I'm going to use them in the different color paints. And we're just going to add them to our stems to make cute little cherry blossoms. Then we just keep repeating this with the different layers of paint until we get a nice little cherry blossom look on our vase. Then I decided I wanted to add a little bit of pink to the rim, so I'm using a Q-tip and I'm just going to go around the outside of the rim. And once I completed this, I thought, wow, this is really pink, so maybe I should mute it out a little bit. And so I used a little bit of that plaster over the top so it just lightly showed through. So using that egg carton again and some Mod Podge in matte, we're going to go ahead and set the vase down on the egg carton. And I'm using a big brush here and I'm going to do a nice coat of Mod Podge over the entire side of this vase. And once that has completely dried, I'll flip the vase over and do the opposite side with the Mod Podge. This will just allow everything to seal in and to stay on to the vase and not chip off easily. So now to find something to fill our vase. I found these little berries at Hobby Lobby and they were $1.99 a pick, but I got them after Christmas and so they were 75% or 90% off. So it was a really good deal. So I'm going to grab 2 of these picks and I'm going to go ahead and add them to our vase. And wow, this turns out so elegant. You would never know that we transformed this dollar vase from Walmart into a beautiful piece of art. And this one here is for those decoupage fans out there. We're starting out with this metal flower that I got at the Dollar Tree, and we're going to remove the hanger. Now let's put this on a paintable surface, and to keep everything from moving around, I'm using a little piece of painter's tape. I wanted to rough up this little piece a little bit, so I'm using some blackboard paint, burnt umber, and plaster paint from Waverly. And I started out with the plaster and I just layered these onto my piece. By the time I got to the burnt umber paint, I was not liking how it was turning out. So I grabbed a baby wipe and I just cleaned it off, and we're gonna start over because I wanted to go more with a pale color and this was just too rustic for me. But I did want to rough it up still a little bit. So we're gonna go back and redo this. And this time we're just going to use the plaster paint and just a little bit of that burnt umber from Folk Art. I'll set this aside to dry, and I grabbed out a wood coaster. And what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to do a nice light coat of our Waverly chalk paint in the color plaster after I put this on a paintable surface. Once that has dried, I grab my Mod Podge and we're going to do a nice coat of Mod Podge over the top of this wood coaster. While that is drying, let's prep our napkin. I found this adorable flower napkin at Home Goods, and we're going to use this napkin. And to remove the bottom 2 layers, I'm using a little piece of painter's tape, and this will just allow me to get those layers off a little bit easier without ripping that top layer. Next, we're going to take that napkin and layer it over the top of the coaster. Let's grab a piece of parchment paper and layer that on top of the napkin. I'm going to use a heat press for this, but an iron would work just fine. And I'm just going to go ahead and iron my napkin. And this is going to allow the Mod Podge to adhere to the napkin and keep everything in place. Let's remove that piece of parchment paper and grab our zip sander. But if you don't have a zip sander, no problem. Just grab a sanding block and you can go ahead and just sand off the remaining pieces of the napkin from this coaster. Now I'm going to put that back on my paintable surface, and using some Mod Podge, we're just going to do a nice little coat over the top of the napkin to seal everything in place. While that is drying, I grabbed these wood stickers that I found at Dollar Tree. And the sticker part works okay on them. They're not great, but I kept them attached to the backing, and I just cut them out, and we're going to tape them down to our paintable surface. And this is where it gets a little bit fun here. We're going to take some of this sugar metallic paint from Folk Art, and I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to paint over the top of these. And the color on this is Smoky Quartz, and it's number 50917 if you're interested. I really like this paint. It's kind of like a coppery sparkle paint, and I've been using it a lot lately in my decor pieces. While that dries, let's go back to our coaster. And I pulled this coaster out, and we're going to go ahead and grab some of that plaster paint again. And I'm going to dry brush around the outside of it to kind of give it a frame. And I'll quickly go ahead and dry this with my heat tool. And once it is completely dry, I'm going to do another coat of Mod Podge. And I'm mostly doing this to help adhere the stickers to the top of this, but it also does seal in that paint. And while the Mod Podge is still wet, we're going to position our stickers on top. Now let's go ahead and put everything together. I'm first going to go ahead and add back my hanger to my little flower. Next, I just put my little coaster on top of the flower, and I felt like it was blending in a little bit too much and I wanted a darker frame. So back to the paintable surface, and we grabbed our sugar metallic Smoky Quartz paint. Now let's go ahead and just dry brush that around the outside perimeter of our coaster. And back to our flower. Let's go ahead and now hot glue that to the center of our flower. And now here is our finished little hanger. This turns out adorable. I think this is a perfect little hanger for the spring or the summer. And there you have it, 4 beautiful cherry blossom projects. I hope you enjoyed these crafts as much as I did. If you're looking for more fun and creative ideas, be sure to check out our next video. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss an update. Thank you for watching, and until next time, craft more, stress less.